Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're zeroing in on the Strait of Hormuz to figure out exactly why Iran is threatening global shipping. We're going to use some recent reports and statements from U.S. officials to map out the military tactics, the underlying economic strategies, and the massive diplomatic fallout surrounding this crucial choke point.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're breaking things down into 5 quick parts. We'll start with the flashpoint at the Strait of Hormuz, then look at the tactics used against global shipping, the economic leverage strategy, U.S. countermeasures, and finally, the global diplomatic front. So part 1, flashpoint, Strait of Hormuz, a critical waterway contested. We've got to establish the geographic and strategic center of this whole conflict.
To really grasp the friction right now, you just have to look at 2 totally contrasting narratives. After an attack on a commercial ship, Tehran officially declared this vital waterway closed to maritime traffic. But the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, stepped right in and contradicted that. They put out a statement firmly asserting that the Strait of Hormuz remains open to all vessels seeking to lawfully transit the international waterway. So right out of the gate, we're looking at 2 entirely incompatible realities being broadcast about literally one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth.
Moving right along to Section 2, tactics against global shipping, the mechanics of the threat. We know there's a standoff, but how exactly is this playing out on the water?
Well, U.S. officials, including the U.S. ambassador to the UN, have been highly specific about what's actually happening out there. When they cite basic violations of international law, they aren't just talking about military posturing. According to our sources, this specifically means 2 things: throwing sea mines into international waterways and indiscriminately attacking civilian and commercial shipping vessels.
And to pull off these disruptions, they're deploying some very specific military hardware. U.S. military assessments point to a dense concentration of Iranian assets parked right on the strait. We're talking advanced radar sensors to track movement, drone capabilities, and missile batteries positioned to enforce that closure declaration we just talked about, plus, of course, those sea mines. It's a highly localized, intense web of military tech aimed directly at a major maritime choke point.
That brings us to Section 3, the economic leverage strategy, looking beyond the waterway. This is crucial because it explains the why. It isn't just about controlling water, it's about what that water represents. Now, what's really interesting about this is how U.S. officials view the broader goal. From their perspective, targeting civilian shipping isn't just some regional military tactic, it is a deliberate attempt to squeeze the global economy. By threatening the vessels that carry international trade and energy supplies, U.S. officials see this as a strategy to gain immense geopolitical leverage. Essentially, it's an attempt to hold the world's economy hostage to get their way. But here is a truly fascinating twist from our sources. Despite the missile batteries, the sea mines, and the direct attacks on commercial ships right in the middle of an energy choke point, global oil prices have actually stayed at pre-war levels. You'd probably expect a massive spike in energy costs given how important the strait is, but so far, those economic shockwaves just haven't hit the energy markets like you might anticipate. Let's transition to Section 4, U.S. countermeasures, the retaliatory response. How are the U.S. and its allies actually responding to all this? Let's look at this number, 300. Over a recent 1-week period, U.S. forces launched multiple rounds of military strikes, hitting a total of more than 300 Iranian military targets. And get this, in just one single night, they struck about 140 of those targets. These are designed to be proportional but highly precise strikes, aimed right at the radar, drones, and missile batteries we discussed, specifically to degrade the ability to threaten the strait. But it's not just physical strikes, it's a multi-layered response strategy. Step 1 is that military degradation of assets at the strait, but Step 2 actually shifts to finance. For example, the U.S. Energy Department and other officials have targeted the financial networks of regime elites. They're specifically sanctioning individuals who run global luxury real estate empires. And then Step 3 brings in regional cooperation. This involves working with the Israeli and Lebanese governments to eliminate and disarm the Iranian proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's a comprehensive approach designed to take all of that economic and military leverage off the table. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the global diplomatic front, looking at isolation and influence. Let's zoom out and see how this plays out on the global stage, especially at the UN. And this brilliantly illustrates the current state of diplomatic play. At the United Nations, a staggering 143 countries have formally condemned Iran's actions.
That really shows the scale of geopolitical isolation here. The broader international community is reacting strongly to these disruptions in global shipping and violations of international law. The pushback is vast and it's highly unified.
But this diplomatic friction isn't just happening across oceans. It's literally happening right on American soil. Recently, a senior official in the New York City mayor's office actually tried to arrange a meeting with Iran's UN ambassador right in New York. Well, the U.S. State Department immediately stepped in and shut it down. According to U.S. officials, they canceled the meeting at the absolute last minute because they wanted to prevent what they called a massive propaganda victory for Iran, especially while the nation is actively targeting shipping and sitting in international isolation. Now, I've got a question for you that might seem totally out of left field based on everything we've talked about so far. What role does Cuba play in this Middle Eastern conflict? It seems totally disconnected, right? Well, here is that number 300 again, but in a totally different and honestly kind of startling context. According to warnings cited by former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, which have been echoed in recent security discussions, there are reportedly nearly 300 Iranian-made Shahed drones stationed in Cuba. That brings a very real piece of this Middle Eastern geopolitical puzzle literally just 90 miles off the coast of Florida.
And those 300 drones, they're just one part of a much larger foreign footprint in the Western Hemisphere. U.S. officials point out that alongside the Shahed drones, there are also active Chinese intelligence posts and Russian signals collection sites operating in Cuba. So while the U.S. is heavily focused on the Strait of Hormuz, they're simultaneously having to reassert their presence in their own hemisphere to counter these allied adversarial networks operating right on their doorstep.
Which brings us to our final thought. We started out looking at a single maritime choke point in the Middle East, and we've traced the ripple effects through global economics, intense U.S. military countermeasures, UN diplomacy, all the way to drone bases in the Caribbean. So the big question we're left with is this. As vital choke points face these unprecedented, multifaceted threats, how will the global community protect the future of international shipping? The answer to that is absolutely going to define the next decade of global trade and security. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.